Okay, we're now going to continue with our next topic, which is cakes and icings. All right, making cakes. There, these are five commonly known methods used to make cakes. There are actually more. Most basic that uh, one should know will be these five, which is the creaming method, this two-stage blending method, foaming or sponge method, and angel food method, and lastly the chiffon methods. Okay. Okay, first of all, let's look what the creaming method is about. Okay, the creaming method is also known as the conventional method. Okay, how is it done? It usually starts um, the fat and sugar being beaten first until it becomes a batter. There are no sugar granules inside the mixing bowl, and only after that you add other ingredients according to sequence based on the recipe. In this case, you'll slowly add eggs and then flour and maybe some other ingredients. Okay, and you will beat the batter until it becomes a creamy like in texture. Okay, the second one is called the two-stage method, also called the blended method. It is developed for use for modern high-ratio shortening, simpler than the creaming method, and it's called two-stage because the liquids uh, are added in two stage rather as compared to the creaming method where you add the liquid all in once. Okay, all right. You want a further demonstration or example of each of the baking methods? You can click on each of these individual links provided here in the notes, and then you will go to the YouTube link. Okay. I will not cover in the lecture because each video is about 7 to 9 minutes long, and I multiply that by 4 videos. It will make this video longer. So I'll just give you a brief explanation. Um, Throughout this video, you can pause and open up your notes in Elan and access the YouTube link if you want to see in detail of each of how each method is being used and the procedures. Okay. All right. Now the third stage, uh, the third, sorry, pardon, the third mixing method is called the um, foaming or sponge method. This is where all egg is and all egg foam cakes are similar in which it contains little to no shortening and depends on mostly all of the leavening in the air trapped in the beaten egg. Okay. All right. The angel fawn method, however, uses only egg white uh, in the batter and contains no fat. Sponge method uses the the whole egg, the egg yolk and the egg white, and mixed with other ingredients to form the batter. While the angel food method only use egg white to mix the batter. Okay. uh, a detailed explanation of how or demonstration of sponge method can be accessed in this YouTube link. The video is about 9 minutes long. And lastly is the chiffon method. Okay, the batter of the chiffon method will usually contain of flour, egg yolk, vegetable oil, and water. Fall into a whites, and that is the basic ingredients for a chiffon method. You want to do a specific recipe like what I'm going to show you, like pandan or any other flavoring, it's usually added after these core ingredients are added. Okay. Okay. The general procedure you can see here for creamy method is first line the pie pans within the pie dough, beat the eggs little at a time, add 1/4 of dry ingredients and mix, and lastly add 1/3 of liquid ingredients and mix in. Repeat until all the dry and liquid ingredients are incorporated. And this is the general procedure step. If you're doing um, sponge method, okay, start with a wire whip or extra mixture. You beat the eggs until they are very thick and light. If you are doing the angel food, you will only use egg whites. Okay, pour in the sieve flour in 3 or 4 stages until all flour is beaten in. Si flour ni adalah tepung yang you dah dah tapis tu. Okay. And lastly is to the third step is to add melted melted butter or melted margarine into it. Suppose to the creaming method, we start with the butter first, followed by the sugar. For the sponge method, we usually start with the eggs first, okay, followed by the other ingredients. In the sponge method, the butter is added later on or near to the end of the mixing process. Okay. Understanding cake making, cake formula types. Proper mixing method for a particular formula will be depends on the balance of ingredients. If the fat is high, use the creaming method or the two-stage methods. Okay, because like I said before, uh, if you see the demonstration in the video, you will the fat is usually the first ingredient that goes into the mixing bowl, followed by the sugar. Heat it up together. And only after that, the eggs and flour and any relevant ingredients will go in. Okay. Right. The two-stage methods may be used if percentage of sugar is above 100% and if the fat is emulsified shortening. Right. If the fat is low and the eggs and sugar are high, use an uh, egg foam method, which is either the sponge method or the angel food method. Okay. Right. Okay, for high fat cakes, which is either the creaming or the two-stage method, the two-stage method is generally quicker because okay, the flour is mixed for a long time and two conditions are necessary to prevent gluten from developing toughness, which is to increase the percentage of sugar, and second, emulsify shortening, which blends through to prevent toughness. Okay. Cakes that are made using the two-stage formula will have 1. Good volume, 2. Lightness, 3. A fine and velvety texture, and 4. Great tenderness. Texture of butter cakes made by creamy method is usually coarser. In this case, creamy method cakes are generally somewhat less tender. Okay, as for low-fat cakes, right? Low-fat or no-fat cakes, whichever we want to call it, must depend on the foaming action of the egg for parts of their leavening. Because remember, at the beginning of the beating process, the egg goes in first. Okay, for the sugar, the flour, and if you use butter or no butter or other shortening, it will usually come in at the end of the process. Sponge cake will have a springy texture and are tougher than shortened cakes. Okay, flour for sponge cakes. Use flour for sponge cakes must be weak because this is to avoid the cake from being tough. Uh, because of the glutenization process. Okay? And cornstarch is often added to cake flour for sponge cake to weaken the flour further. Okay. And in other ways, this will reduce the amount of gluten, which will lessen the effect of the hardened structure of the cake. Okay. All right. Okay. Now for the baking steps. Start with the scaling and the panning. Okay. All right. First of all, you will need to prepare pan before mixing cake batter, so cake batter can be baked without delay. If you use for high fat cakes, the bottom of the layer must be greased first. For sheet cakes, line the pan with greased parchment. For an angel food cake, you do not need to grease the pan because the batter must be aligned to each side in order to rise. As for sponge cakes, the sponge cake layers with small percent of fat will grease the bottom but not on the side. Okay. Okay. So ni kata dia high fat cake, which is creamy method and the double method. Bottom layer must be grease. For sponge method, line the pan with grease parchment. For angel cake, tak perlu grease. For sponge cake, grease the bottom saja but not the sides. Okay. Right now comes for the baking. The following guidelines will help you avoid unwanted things for your cakes. Number one, you will need to preheat the oven. So your recipe requires you to reset the temperature at 180 degrees Celsius, for example. It is not that bila you dah masukkan cake batter dalam acuan dia, you baru on uh, oven tu up from zero, tapi dia punya suhu walaupun you set 180 tapi dia still 40 darjah Celsius. You tak boleh masuk terus macam tu. You kena biar oven tu preheat. And ini bila you buka oven tu dial ke 180, means you kena tunggu sampai internal temperature tu 180 baru bila masuk cake tu dalam oven dan keluarkan. Masuk and bila cukup masanya keluarkan cepat-cepat. Okay? Always remember to preheat your oven. Make sure your oven shelves are level sekata. Do not let pans touch each other uh, in the oven. Kalau you buat lebih daripada satu kek, pastikan jangan bersentuh antara satu sama lain ataupun jangan sentuh uh, pan yang ada kek dan pan yang ada cookies. Elakkan benda tu. And of course, bake at the correct temperature. Kalau resipi dia kata 180 Celsius, gunalah Celsius. Kalau dalam Fahrenheit, uh, and you kena ubahlah ikut Fahrenheit. Kalau you punya oven tu Celsius tapi resipi Fahrenheit, you kena play the conversion game lah. Okay. Alright. If an oven is too hot, it will often cause the cake to set unevenly or to set before it's fully risen, and the crust will be too dark because the caramelization process will be rapidly outside. So when the crust is too dark, it will give a burnt appearance, which is not good. On the other hand, too slow on our too slow or low temperature inside the oven, it will usually cause in poor volume, texture, and potential for cake to fall. Cake to fall meaning structure-nya tak kukuh lah. Okay, tak kukuh, dia tak padat. Okay, so be very careful and in choosing the correct temperatures to bake your cake. Yeah, guys. Okay, during baking, do not jangan kata tangan open the oven or disturb the cake until they are finished rising or are partially brown. Ni janganlah suka hati apa, buka tutup. Just biar dia dalam oven sehingga kek tu kurang-kurangnya sehingga kek tu dah naik sikit during the baking process. Okay, because if you disturb the cake before they are set, may cause them to fall. Sebab you buka tutup, yang haba pun tak konsisten, so you punya cake tu dia tak boleh set betul-betul kalau you buka tutup. Alright, and if steam in the oven is available, use it for cream and two-stage batter. Right, okay, cakes baked with steam baked with a flat will have a flatter top. Alright, test for doneness. Alright, for shortened cake, um, shortened cakes will have slightly shrink away from the sides of the pan. Okay, cakes that are springy, the center of the top spring back. Center of the top will spring back when pressed slightly. And third, a cake tester or prick insert into the center of the cake will come out clean. Okay, nak tahu macam mana dia masak, boleh ambil apa lidi, celup dalam kek tu dan tengok balik. Kalau tak ada benda-benda basah yang stick pada lidi tu, insyaAllah kek tu dah kira masak lah. Okay, kriteria lain macam saya kata tadi lah, kalau tekan spring tu kek tu springy, tekan dia naik balik, and kek yang ada shortening dalam ingredients dia sebabkan kita tak grease sama ada kita grease atau tak grease, dia akan kecut daripada sisi pan tu lah. Right, that's what all this means. Okay, once baking is finished, the cake will be need to cool and move from the pans. Alright. Okay, cool layer cakes and sheet cakes will take about 15 minutes in the pan, and then they are turned out while slightly warm. Just they are too fragile to turn out when hot, and they may break. So turn out cake layers into rags to finish off the cooling. Okay. So layer cakes atau sheet cakes keluarkan daripada oven, dan biarkan at least 15 minit dalam pan sebelum kita keluarkan. Yang dia kata sini. Okay. Jangan kita keluarkan layer cakes atau sheet cakes ni bila dia tengah panas tu, sebab dia mungkin akan rosak atau break. Okay. As for angel food cake, you need to cool angel food cakes upside down inside the pan, because it supports the edge of the pan so that the top of the cake is off the bench. Right. Turn out sheet cakes, you need to sprinkle tops slightly with granulated sugar. Set an empty sheet pan on the top, bottom side down. Put both pans. Remove the top pan and peel the parchment off the cake. Okay. Right. Next is attitude adjustments. Okay, depending on where you are when you bake cakes or any bakery items, you will need to make adjustment. Making a cake in Kuala Terengganu may be different if you are doing it at a higher place. For example, if you are in Genting or Cameron Highlands, there will need to be some adjustments made as compared if you are baking the cake at sea level in Kuala Terengganu, for example. Okay, because let's see here. Because at high altitudes, atmospheric pressure is much lower than at sea levels. Okay, that's why formulas must be adjusted to suit baking conditions over 2,300 feet above sea level. All right. For leavening, gases will expand more when the air pressure is lower. So baking powder and baking soda must be decreased if you are baking cakes at Cameron or Genting Islands. Okay. Creaming and foaming procedures should also be reduced so that less air is evaporated. Okay, okay. Tathanus, which involves flours and eggs. Okay, cake that requires firm structure at high altitude. So both eggs and flour must be increased to supply protein. Um, get the firm uh, texture if you're making cake uh, high up in the mountains or in the hills. Okay. Next, tenderizers in terms of shortening sugar. Okay, shortening sugar must be decreased to make the structure of the cake firmer if you're high above sea level. As for liquids, at a high altitude, the water boils at a slightly lower temperature and evaporates easily. The liquid must be increased to prevent excessive dryness both during and after baking. So di tempat tanah tinggi, you kena guna air yang lebih banyak lah daripada standard recipe kalau you bawa masak di aras air laut. As for baking temperature, increase baking temperature at about 25 degree Fahrenheit or 14 degrees Celsius if you are above one you are one 1,050 meters above sea level. Okay. And as for pan greasing, for high fat cakes, they tend to stick. They tend to be sticky at high altitudes. Maksudnya maklumlah sebab tanah tinggi itu tinggi dan dia lebih sejuk, so they tend to become sticky lah bila itu sejuk. So when you grease your pan, make sure you grease your pan more lebih banyak. Okay. And lagi tip kedua, you should remove baked cakes from the pan as soon as possible. Sebab maklumlah tanah tinggi, uh, suhu dia lagi rendah. So benda tu kek tu akan cepat lebih sejuk. Dan grease apabila dia panas, dia melt tak ada masalah. Tapi bila dia sejuk sebab dia akan keras. So that's why it stick. So that's why it's important for this point. Lepas masak from the pan, remove the cake from the pan as soon as possible because it will cool rapidly when you cook it uh, in a place like Cameron or Genting Islands. Right. Okay. Right. Next, let's look at the role of icings on cake. Okay. Icings ni serve uh, three main functions. First of all, they help improve the keeping quality of the cake by forming a protective coat around it. Two, they will contribute with flavor and richness to the cake. And three, they improve the appearance of the cake. So, if you ever heard uh, the English expression, this is the icing on the cake, meaning you have something that looks good, but when you add something else, it will be wow, superb. It will look better. Okay, so that's how the idiom of icing on the cake comes from, meaning you have something that is good in appearance, but just because you add a little touch up here and there, it becomes more beautiful in appearance. Okay, so that's generally what the three functions of icing is about. Okay, okay. All right. Generally, there are basically six types, which is the fondant, buttercream, foam type icing, fudge type icing, flat type icing, and royal or decoration icing. We'll look into them by one, and we'll see them how they look like through Google afterwards. Okay. First type is the fondant. Okay, fondant is basically a sugar syrup that is crystallized to a smooth, creamy white mess. When applied, it is set into a shiny, non-sticky coat, and because it's difficult to make very short, fondant is almost always purchased already prepared. Next is the buttercream. Okay, buttercream has a light, smooth mixture of fat and confectioner's sugar. It may also contain egg to increase the smoothness or lightness. Simple buttercream are made by creaming together fat and sugar to the desired consistency and lightness. There are generally two types of buttercream. One is the meringue type buttercream, which is prepared by first beating egg whites and adding to a boiling syrup or just sugar with soft butter and is then mixed into the meringue. Second is French buttercream. It is similar to the meringue type. In this case, the foam is made with egg yolks and sometimes whole egg whites and boiling syrups. Okay, use buttercream when you are in cold weather or up in the highlands only because okay, blend a small quantity of emulsified shortening with the butter to stabilize it. Okay. So buttercream ni dia lebih sesuai pada negara iklim sejuk ataupun kalau you masak kek tu di tempat yang tinggi lah. Right, next type is the foam type icing. Okay, a simple meringue made with a boiling syrup, or in other words, it's sometimes called boiled icing. Some also contains of the foam type icing contains stabilizing ingredients, in this case gelatins. These icings are not really stable and they should be used the day they are prepared. Kalau guna untuk hari Isnin, guna untuk hari Isnin saja. Kalau ada lebih, jangan sekali-sekali simpan atau nak guna besok ke lusa ke atau minggu depan ke. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Next is flat icing. It's also called water icing because it's simple mixture of 10 times sugar, water, and sometimes corn syrup and flavoring. Flat icings are warmed to about 38 degrees Celsius for application and are handled like fondant. Next type is fudge type icing. Okay, fudge type icing is rich cooked icing, usually chocolate lah, right? And fudge icings are heavy and thick and may be flavored with a variety of ingredients. Fudge icings are stable and holds up well on cakes in storage. And to use stored fudge icing, all you need to do is warm it up in a double boiler until soft enough to be spread. Okay. Uh, Fudge icing ni pekat bila dimasak dia memang cair lah. Tapi um, kalau you biar over time, the fudge icing tu akan keras mula. Dia akan keras. Dan kalau you tak nak dia keras, you memang kena panaskan semula. Okay. Dan kata kat sini, uh, you can use fudge icing tu kalau you ada lebih, you boleh store and use it for the next day. Just all you need to do is just warm it up and become soft enough, and you can use um, that fudge icing on another cake if you have leftovers. Okay. Next is the royal icing. Okay. Says here it's similar to flat icing guna gula dengan air, tapi it's much thicker. It's made with egg whites, which is make it harder and brittle when dry. Okay, this is the key difference compared to flat icing, seperti the egg whites. And it's also called decorating or decorous icing because it is used mostly exclusively for decorative works. Okay, for those who are not familiar with the 6 types, here's a visual representation what fondant looks like. This is how they make the fondant. This is how buttercream looks like. This is how foam icing looks like. This is how flat icing looks like. This is fudge icing. And lastly, this is how the royal icing looks like. Okay. All right. When selecting your icing, in general, use heavy frosting with heavy cakes and light frostings with light cakes. Use the best quality flavoring and use them sparingly. The flavor of the frosting should not be stronger than that of the cake. Okay, because after all, the use of icing is not as a it's not supposed to overpower the cake. It's supposed to enhance um, the cake to make it look better. Okay, all right. Use colors sparingly. Light pastel shades are more appetizing than loud colors. Okay, so kalau nak guna coloring, jangan jangan guna coloring tu excessively lah. Right. And lastly, using and handling basic types. All right. For small cakes, cupcakes are usually iced by dipping top of a soft icing, and petit fours, which are tiny cakes, are cut from the sheet of cakes. All right. As for sheet cakes are ideal for volume service because they require little label, bake, ice, and decorate, and they keep well as long as they are uncut. So for this topic, the key points that you need to learn and have a good extensive understanding are the five the five the five basic mixing methods to make cakes, okay, as well as the five mixing cakes, as well as the appropriate process for each of those five cake methods, or from the scaling, panning, or baking, all the way to cooling. The adjustments that you need to make to your ingredients if you are making the cake at a different height, uh, not as meaning you are baking your cake not at sea level. I don't know whether it's Cameron Highlands or maybe up Mount Everest. You need to adjust your ingredients accordingly based on these guidelines. Okay, right. And lastly, you will need to what are the know and understand what are the icings that are used in cake baking. Okay, right? Okay. Right. So with that, we've come to the end of this week's lesson. Right. Like, if you want to know more details about each of the uh, cake make cake mixing methods, I've already provided YouTube links for you. You can access this in your notes so that you can see in detail how the method is being executed from start to finish. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll see each other in next week's lesson. Thank you. Assalamualaikum. Take care.